How are you?
Good, thank you for
Good to
coming.
see you. Yeah, no, thank you guys for having me. I am in New Hampshire for the week. We're on recess because of the 4th of July holiday. We go back on Tuesday for a few weeks, and we're going to continue our appropriations process. Let me just kind of give you a quick overview of what we're trying to accomplish with the balance of the year. Given the fact that it's a presidential year, we've got the convention coming up. Our legislative business is a little modified this year. We have been trying to focus on the most primary obligation that we have, the budget. So we're working through the appropriations process. The appropriations process, in my view, is the best place where any member can influence and help represent their state, their district, and their particular constituents. So when you hear me talk about quote-unquote regular order, which is a Washington, D.C. term, it means we've got to have regular order where the House does its work, the Senate does its work, we have committees of conference, and then we get bills to the President's desk. Why do I say that? Because whether it's relative to the heroin and opioid epidemic, whether it's EPA mandates and MS4 permits and Great Bay, whether it's the fishing industry and what NOAA is trying to do to destroy the fishing industry, or things like the Cadillac tax, those are all issues that we can address through the appropriations process, and where I can be the most effective legislator in addition to filing standalone legislation. So this is where I have focused a lot of my time and attention. Most of you probably know I'm on the Financial Services Committee. I was added a few months ago now to the Budget Committee, despite the fact that I actually voted against the budget, voted against the omnibus, because I felt that the $50 billion in additional spending was not necessary, considering we have a $450 billion deficit and a $19 trillion debt. Typically in Washington, what happens is when you go along, you get along. Well, I did something different. I voted against what my party leadership wanted, and rather than being ostracized, they turned around and said, you know, we want to have you on the committee and try to fix some of the problems and challenges that we're having in the budget process. Probably in part because I was on the Budget Committee in my first term, when Paul Ryan was then the budget chairman, and because of my experience as mayor of our state's largest city, Manchester, and my business experience. So what I have tried to do in the last couple of months is find waste, fraud, and abuse, eliminate duplicative programs, really try to work for the taxpayer. The size and scope of Washington is huge. It is far larger than you can ever imagine. $3.4 trillion of spending is a lot of money. It's so much money that people can't relate to it. But in the reality that we're in, we're talking about roughly per taxpayer $100,000 in debt per taxpayer. That's what our long-term debt equates to. I don't want to leave that for my kids, for your grandkids. This is something incredibly important to me, and I think to most people who are fiscally responsible here in New Hampshire and across the country. We've got to figure out a way to solve that problem. So when I got on the Budget Committee, I started focusing on eliminating either duplicative programs or waste, fraud, and abuse, looking at areas where we're not spending properly. So we've been able to identify $60 billion in spending reductions. Something that I've been also advocating for is a balanced budget amendment. Advocating for a balanced budget. We have to do that in communities, we have to do that in our businesses, in our homes, we have to do it here in the state of New Hampshire. Only in Washington do you not have to balance a budget. And I joke on a regular basis, I know that members of Congress know how to balance a budget because the budgets that we have for our offices, if we actually go over those budgets, guess what? We are personally liable to the Treasury. And nobody ever goes over. When it comes to their own pocketbook, members know how to budget. When it comes to your pocketbook, they don't care. They think that it's someone else's money, it doesn't matter, and we have larger, expansive growth of government. That's not what I think is in the best interest of our nation or of our state. That's not where we are. So I've been very busy on the Budget Committee trying to work through that. The most important work that I've been doing is in an area that I never thought I would be focusing my attention on. I'm chairman of the Congressional Task Force to combat heroin and opioid use. Obviously, here in New Hampshire, we had 439 people last year who died of a drug-related overdose. We went from 47th per capita to 3rd per capita in about a year in terms of deaths. Most of the nation thought that this was a problem just in New Hampshire. primarily because of the presidential primary. I had to inform members of Congress that this is happening all over the country. It's pervasive throughout the country, about 50,000 people last year alone. And those numbers are climbing. That pains me. It pains me to think that our family members or friends are dying because they're addicted to opioids and then move over to heroin. 4 out of 5 heroin users started with a legal opioid prescription. It can happen to any one of us. So in my quest to try to solve this challenge, I went to the southern border a few months ago to take a look at how the heroin was coming illegally from 3 cartels from Mexico across our southern border. Most of the drugs that are being used here in New Hampshire, most of the heroin is coming from Mexico. So to me, there's 2 problems. You have a supply side and a demand side. The demand, we've got to deal with the criminal who is bringing the drug across the border, utilizing gangs in the western part of the country to bring it across to Massachusetts, Lowell Lawrence, and bring it up into New Hampshire and northern New England. There, we should fully prosecute on a federal level, which is not happening right now in the state of New Hampshire, and it needs to happen. Our federal prosecutors need to address this from a federal perspective, and send a message to those individuals that if you want to deal heroin and hurt or injure or kill our residents, that you're going to pay a price. But on the treatment and recovery side, it's very important that we understand and appreciate if you have an addiction, it's an illness. And I think it should be treated as such, and let me tell you why. And not everybody necessarily agrees with that. I was a tough-on-crime mayor, and I'm a tough-on-crime congressman, but I will tell you what, if somebody has an addiction, we want to get them help. We want to get them into long-term recovery and treatment and recovery. Because if we do that through a drug court or recovery court, taxpayers are going to pay $8,000 on average individual, and the likelihood of success for that person is about 65%. If we decide to incarcerate that person, try to make throw the book out, it's going to cost $30,000 to $40,000 per year, and in some circumstances they're incarcerated multiple years. Their likelihood of success of getting off of the drugs is about 19%. So just based on facts, it doesn't make sense. But I think we ought to be giving people a second chance, a second opportunity. And I've discovered that in my own life when I started talking publicly a few years ago about the fact that I've got a family member who has a mental illness diagnosis for the last 20 years. I've been the direct caregiver to that person. I've seen firsthand how the stigma is associated with people who have a mental health illness. I've seen it here in our state, unfortunately. And I see it with those who are addicted to some sort of drug, heroin, or something worse. And I think it's about time that we look at individuals differently, for the good in them, not the bad, and try to find a way to help them to recover, to help our communities, and to make sure that we don't see another 439 people die this coming year. Unfortunately, we are still on track to either meet or exceed that number. So the legislation that you may have heard about in Washington, the CARA Act, passed the Senate a few months ago. They sent it over to the House. It was not funded. Our job was to fund that, so we spearheaded through our committee. What we decided to do was break up that piece of legislation to 4 different committees of jurisdiction, fund each and every component, 18 different bills, and then pass them. We passed each and every one bipartisanly, put it back together, voted on the final package, and now it's in committee conference, and it'll go to the President's desk probably in July. Unfortunately, when we passed that legislation, I'm sure nobody read a newspaper or saw a headline that Republicans are leading and working with Democrats. Because the media doesn't care to tell the country when we are proactively working with the other side of the aisle, putting politics aside, and working on behalf of our friends and our families and our neighbors. This is what we're up against. It's hard enough to be in a tough election, in a tough race in a presidential year. And believe me, this is going to be a tough year. Despite the fact that we've had 8 years of this president, who I think has damaged the economy, has fundamentally changed or fundamentally and inappropriately interpreted the Constitution, has used his executive authority in a way that no other president has doubled the long-term debt that we've had, and I think put us in a far different position than we ever expected or anticipated when he first started in his tenure. Despite all that, there's a lot riding against the things that we want to do for this country, and it's largely in how media outlets communicate what we're doing or not doing. Let me give you an example. This week, last week, there was a sit-in on the House floor. I don't know how many of you heard about this. So we had a tragic incident, a terrorist attack in Orlando. 49 people lost their lives. They never should have. Plain and simple, they never should have. But that was a terrorist attack. I went to classified briefings and I went to unclassified briefings. And that was a terrorist attack. And no member of Congress could tell you otherwise. Yet, last week on the House floor, we witnessed a sit-in where members of the other side of the aisle, from 11:30 until about 10 in the morning until about 10 o'clock at night, took over the floor and demanded gun control votes. And guess what? What the media didn't tell you is that they didn't have a bill. They didn't have an actual bill that they proposed. They violated several different House rules in how they took over the floor. And by the way, there's a process by which if you object to something, you can, through the regular course of business, you can object to something. So we finally decided to go to work at about 10 o'clock at night that evening. We worked until about 3:30 in the morning, got our votes done, adjourned, and came back. But what happened to our state? I came back home on that Thursday. By 8 o'clock at night, I was exhausted. I was up for 2 days. Saw the kids, went to bed for 12 hours. But what happened was, through the lens of the media, the country was hearing gun control. They were not hearing that 49 innocent people died from a terrorist attack. They were not hearing that we actually have had alternatives brought to the floor that the Democrats have blocked. They didn't hear any of that. I think as a party, we need to stand up for the things that we believe in, not reactively, but proactively. We've got to continue to come up with strong ideas to either change our community, our state, or our country. And when we do that, I believe that we not just grow our party, but we grow the number of people who choose to vote for the policies that we espouse. They're very simplistic in lots of forms. More limited government, less taxation, less regulation, free market opportunities, protecting the Constitution, the Bill of Rights. But it goes beyond that. It's about how we, as Republicans, conduct ourselves relative to how we communicate and the ideas that we bring to the table. And when we do that, we actually win. In 2014, unfortunately, I was the only Republican to win. But we did it, and I topped the ticket. I got more votes than Jean Shaheen or Maggie Hassan, Scott Brown, and Walt Havenstein in CD1. We all live in CD1. It's because of how we communicate to not just people within our party, but people outside of our party. I did this when I was mayor, and I did it as a member of Congress. There are people who identify as undeclareds or Democrats that want to be with us because they are frustrated with the leadership on the other side of the aisle. And you're seeing it now with the presidential campaign. So many people supported Bernie Sanders because they did not want Hillary Clinton as their nominee. We have an opportunity to take advantage of that. Invite more people into our party. Understand that we actually are for empowering people, whether it's out of poverty, out of homelessness, into a better job, away from Obamacare, away from requiring federal assistance. That's about empowering people, breaking the cycle, and giving opportunity to somebody for their future, for their kids, and for their grandkids. That's what our party stands for. And I'm an example of that. I was the first in my family to go to college. You know, my parents, they met in what was then called business school. It's not what you think of business school today. They're court stenographers, the people who take notes in court. And they met on the first day. They were the first two students in the class. They eventually got married. They worked hard for years and years and years. And myself and my brother and my sister, I'm the first to go to college, first to go to grad school, first to run for office. A lot of firsts in our family. That was a dream for them and a dream for me. And I want more firsts for my kids, for your kids. And for the first time in generations, America doesn't think that the next generation is going to be better than the current. That pains me as an American. So when people ask me, Frank, why are you running? It was an easy decision, by the way. I very much enjoy serving our state. I've served as a state representative, as a city alderman, as a mayor, and in Congress. I enjoy it. But the things that you can do with passion and focus to help other people matters. It matters. One of my closest friends is a woman now named Abby Lazar. We text on a regular basis. I talk to her. A year ago, she was days away from death because she was addicted to heroin. And nobody would take her in. Her family, her friends, her drug dealer, because she was stealing from everybody. And by the grace of God, she decided to call a nurse that had helped her months ago. Got into a hospital, doctor said you were days away from death. Miraculously, started to move away from heroin use. And today is 9 months clean with an 8-month-old son. She is somebody that we should think about as somebody who faced their demons, provided with some help, but is now somebody who has a second chance at life. We can provide that because of the policies that we espouse for anyone in America. And that, for me, is the passion and why I decide to continue to serve in public office. It's a real, it's an honor to be in public office. It's a lot of hard work, but it's worth it. Because when you help people, when you espouse for the beliefs that we do, and you see positive results, it's exciting to see what America could be again. So I'm home this week. I'm spending a lot of time running around the district because last year we were in DC about 37 weeks of the year. It's important for me to be home as much as I possibly can, to see my family, to see constituents, because you're grounded when you come home. You don't forget about what the people that you represent, what they want. So you see me home a lot. I'm accessible. I do the telephone town halls when I'm in Washington. I do the regular town halls when I'm here. But I would invite you through the next several months to help me and guide me in how I vote on your behalf. And I mean that seriously. You have an ability to influence how I vote. The voting card that I hold is yours. People need to understand that. You know, not many people realize how powerful they are by telling me how they want me to use this. This is a very powerful thing that a member of Congress has, and you can influence it, and you should. And I invite people always to let me know how they think on any issue that comes before us, whether it's in committee or whether it's on the floor. Because you should be directly connected with the person who represents you. And I take that seriously. So, I also ask for your support. I'm running for re-election. We're going to win this race. But I also want to help every other Republican win. Because I know that whether it's the country, whether it's local politics, or whether it's the state, we're going to be in far better shape with Republicans in the corner office and the legislative seats. Just look at what has happened under this president and this governor. Chris is right. There are people, young people are fleeing this state. We're a graying state. This is a fundamental problem when youth does not want to stay here from an economic standpoint. It's a big problem. And I'm glad Chris brought it up because not a lot of people are talking about it. We're about 32nd in the country for job growth. It's easier, quicker, cheaper to start a business in Massachusetts now than New Hampshire. I never thought I would hear myself say that. but it is. We have to expand the industry that's here in the state. We've got to attract younger people by quality of life, better job opportunities, less expensive housing opportunities, better education opportunities. That's not happening under this governor. This is our state, this is our home, and it's not happening under Democrat leadership. So I'm looking forward to this election. I think it's going to be an opportunity for us to change the course of our state and our nation. And I stand with the Republicans, because the Republicans have the better ideas. And they care far deeper about individuals than what I'm seeing from the other side of the aisle. So as I'm home, I'll do everything I can to make sure that we get all Republicans elected. And I invite you to help me in our re-election efforts. We did well in 2014, but I don't want to be the only Republican to win. I want to be with a larger group of Republicans. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. Perfect. All right, I got an end. All right.
I'll see you again.
You will. You will.
Anything else? Any other business we need to conduct?
You mess up with Kevin?
I did. I did.
Come on up.
I would like to get a sense before everybody leaves, how many folks would we like a night,